And a promoter that doesn't like what Robert Smith has said says it's
Don't let him get in there with Cole Froch. Forget Froch is 45, right? All about levels, yeah.
lunatics running the asylum. I'm sorry, but there we are. This is Talk Boxing with Simon Jordan and Spencer Oliver. In fact, it's episode 14. So don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel. But let's get on with this week's show. Spencer, this is the part where I feign interest in how you are and what your week's been. So how are you and how's your week been?
Simon, I'm absolutely superb. My week has been good and I'm looking forward to the following week, actually. I'm flying out to Saudi.
Oh, fantastic. Morning. You're going to see that wonderful thing that I'm so desperately sad that I'm missing, which is Jake Paul and Tommy Fury and the Clown Fest.
You can't deny it's not an intriguing fight. For, you know, like, we'll find ourselves in a situation where you got Jake Paul's fighting the first real boxer that he's boxed. Yep. He's, you know, former UFC stars, etc. And Tommy Fury's putting it all on the line because a loss for Tommy Fury, for me, would be...
Back to Love Island.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Career ending.
Yeah. I'm not going to be shedding any tears. I'm missing it. I hope you have a wonderful time.
Well, I will fill you in.
When you're grifting over there, trying to make your money because for some reason or other you're hugely invested in these things. But anyway, let's get on with this week's show. The first subject I think we should talk about is directly relational to the show that we did last week, which is our reaction to a lot of the things that Robert Smith was a guest last week, for those who didn't see it, and that's unforgettable, or unforgivable, sorry. Unforgettable, the interview, unforgivable, you haven't seen it. But Robert Smith, the General Secretary of the British Boxing Board of No Control, sorry, Robert, British Boxing Board of Control, and all the subjects we talked about. And one of them specifically was with Robert, amongst things like how boxing can evolve and what judges were doing in previous fights, like, you know, Taylor Catterall. But the first subject matter that we talked about was obviously the one that's garnered a lot of attention and brought a lot of ramifications for a lot of people, obviously explicitly the fighter, which is Conor Benn.
Yeah.
And we tried to get under the hood and under the skin of Robert Smith to understand how this situation was allowed to develop.
Yeah.
And we try to push past some of Robert's defence mechanisms of the constant reference of legals this and legals that. Yeah. But what was your thought processes about? Did we hear anything that we didn't already know? Did you get the feeling that we learnt things? Or was it an element of we pushed hard but pretty much got the same responses?
Yeah, well, I think we pushed hard and, you know, I think that Robert was as open as he could be. You know, I think that was probably a fair assessment. I think we did push hard and we kept asking about certain situations, and I think the situation is as it stands. Like, I think that, you know, like Robert said, you know, that what we did find out was that Conor Benn can't box in this country under, you know, like under whatever license he has, because they won't allow it because of this situation, because he's not proved his innocence to the British Boxing Board of Control. So yeah, it's just that's it was an interesting one, but it's just
yeah, I mean, what I tried to ascertain from Robert and what I wanted to ascertain was the chronological order of events.
Yeah.
Because we can't, there's all this subterfuge and the various people that are involved, and we'll get to them in a minute, and if you use their name, then you're trading of it. If you don't use their name, then you can't discuss a subject.
Yeah.
And the problem is that we want to discuss a subject. Sure. I make no apologies for keep discussing Conor Benn and discussing the situation with British Boxing Board of Control, because I think they're two very big issues that make a bad smell about boxing and also question how authoritative and of value the supposed governing body of boxing is. And the one thing that I was trying to ascertain is, or not so much the one thing, but one amongst the many things I wanted to ascertain was what were the timelines and why did this get to the point where that we were months down the line from a first failed test, weeks down the line from a second failed test, and a fight was being seemingly allowed to go on. And
we didn't really get to we didn't really get the answers that we wanted from that. You know, where you're saying, you know, we put those questions to Robert, or you put them to.
Well, I think he answered them, but I'm not entirely sure that the answers were as compelling as they could have been.
Yeah, as conclusive as they should have been.
And the answers were that we were constantly, and this is the question I have about the authority the British Boxing Board of Control has. The constant answer was we were pushing back against legals. What we learnt was that the moment that first VADA test was failed, the British Boxing Board of Control didn't even get a chance to have a fart. They got a legal letter. Yeah. Basically, boom, cease and desist sort of mentality. Yeah. Careful with this. And so the indications were that they seemed to have been waiting for people to tell them what was the next step,
Yeah.
rather than the British Boxing Board of Control saying, this is the next step.
Yeah.
Right? This is the timelines that we expect you to work to. These are the guidelines that we expect you. This is the information that we require. And of course, the argument would be, well, this is not a UCAD test, it's a VADA test. So actually, where's your jurisdiction? But that's the bit that concerns me, is that there seemed to be this pushing around. What I took away from Robert was a good interview. He's a politician. He's a diplomat. He finds a way to not necessarily answer a question by throwing out a compliment and then baiting and redirecting and tell you the reasons why he can't answer that question or the reasons why we should take his answer at face value. When really what I think we learned, Spence, was that the British Boxing Board of Control doesn't have as much authority as it should have.
Yeah, I agree.
And what Robert tried to do, I think, was exude some authority by saying he won't fight on these shores. He will not fight on these shores. He made the point that this is not over, and there's a lot more to come out. And I'm going to hold him to that point where he said, "Come, bring me back in a year," because I want all this crap of legal veneers to be pulled away. I know, like he said to me, you've been in sport, you've owned a professional football club, you know the legalities and the commercialities. I also know that if I want to speak, I can speak. Right? And there seems to be a lot of covering of one's backsides rather than simply saying, we're the British Boxing Board of Control, you need to provide us with the proper information for us to be able to evaluate what it is you're doing, and you need to do it in a timely fashion. And of course, Robert then turned around and said, that, when we got to the 23rd of September, I asked him the question, what was the conclusive position that it made you move from waiting for a situation that happened in July to where you are in terms of suspending the fight? He said, pretty much the second test.
It was sort of like the 11th hour, really, because like the day before, even when we found out that the fight that Conor had failed the tests, the fight was still in the balance, if I'm totally honest. It was not like Conor's failed a test, we found that out, he's failed a second test, fight's off, it's cancelled. That was still then very much in the balance. That fight looked like it was still very much going to go ahead, even though that he had failed these tests. So,
and he was adamant that the decision had already been made.
Yeah.
And that a story breaking didn't make any difference.
What did you make of Eddie Hearn's comments to all of this as well?
Well, I mean, again, you move into that territory. I find myself loath to talk about Eddie Hearn because there's this myth being perpetuated primarily by him that when you talk about him, you're indexing your name to him, and there's a fascination with what he's doing. Tragically, he's neck deep in this subject matter. Yeah. He's the promoter involved in this fight, or one of the promoters. He's been very vociferous. He's the one that talked about legal straight out of the gate. And he's the one that's got a lot to say about it. So we find ourselves in this invidious position, you and I couldn't care less about Eddie Hearn in the slightest, right? I don't put him in a situation where I want to have a go at Eddie Hearn and not have a go at Frank Warren. I don't want to have a go at Frank Warren, but I don't want to have a go at Ben Shalom. Tragically, for Eddie Hearn's argument, Ben Shalom at this moment in time hasn't got a fighter that's caught in this particular situation. Yeah. And Frank Warren has had fighters in the past, but we're talking about the here and now. Yeah, if one of Frank Warren's fighters did this in the here and now, we'd be all over him like a rash too. Right? So my reaction to what Eddie Hearn said was, here we go again, suggesting that other people have an agenda against him. I think he was making an observation that talkSPORT, and I mean probably specifically me, but you by association, were after him. Yeah. I don't have any dog in a fight with Eddie Hearn. I called him a coward at the time, not because I believe he's a coward as a man. I believe that his approach to answering the questions at the time was cowardly. He's gone off on tangents about when he met me, how he knew me, and what that sort of relationship looked like. But none of the questions that we wanted to ask him have ever been answered. And when he turns around and says about Robert Smith, that what Robert Smith says is that tells you everything you need to know about the balance of power inside this sport, inside this country. Because this is the governing body of boxing in this country, and a promoter that doesn't like what Robert Smith has said, says it's
What do you make of comments about, obviously, the timing? You obviously said, look, the board were aware of these results, and yet we got the blame because no one came to us soon enough. But he made comments saying, look, we were told, we told everyone as soon as they could, obviously going back and forth with legal. Robert Smith.
Absolute. Robert Smith had the information the same time as us, and the board did. So they didn't,
In between that, he's saying he's going back and forth with legals before they pulled the fight.
Yeah, but he went back for legals for 5 or 6 weeks. Now, these same people that want to attack me, like talkSPORT, don't say to Robert Smith in that same interview, why did you have the information for 5 or 6 weeks and not make a decision? And he will say, oh, because we were looking into it. All right, but you want to pull the fight 3 days before and Matchroom take the blame while we're waiting on our governing body to make a decision. the people that rule the sport, contractually the people that will decide whether this fight gets sanctioned or not. That's the decision we wait on. We waited on that decision for 5 weeks, and then it gets pulled, and then it's just my fault that it's gone on for 5 weeks. Ask the board. Start these media outlets want to start pointing fingers. Ask the board, and they'll hide behind legally. Yeah. They had the failed tests, and they chose not to cancel the fight. So what more can I say?
My view on that is, how do you have the tail wagging the dog? That's why I asked the question to Robert Smith: who runs boxing in this country?
Yeah.
Promoter, fighter, media, and then you guys at the bottom. Is that how it works? And he was like, no, that's not how it works. But when you see that kind of response, that kind of attitude, that kind of belligerence from Eddie Hearn, it tells me that he thinks, and the promoters think they run the game, and the British Boxing Board of Control are somebody they give fees to and tolerate.
So what did you feel that was the outcome of the whole situation with Robert Smith and this situation with Conor Benn, this current situation that he's in, with these foul tests? Do you think that we got anything out of that last week?
I think we probably got a little bit more than was there before, because we asked questions that
we still never really got the answers, though, did we?
No, we got an answer which basically said they got tests, they were tied up in knots.
Yeah.
They were tied up in knots.
Yeah.
They were tied up in knots. The moment that VADA test was failed, bang, legal letters. Whatever those legal letters said, it was basically designed to put everyone back into a situation where they're back in their box, whatever that box is. And the disappointing thing is that the British Boxing Board of Control can be put in a box. Now, I'm not for the establishment. I wasn't in football suggesting that the FA and the Football League were people I particularly respected, but you had to be governed by their rules, and it doesn't seem the same in boxing. So what I learned is that the power of this situation was with those that had the most benefit from it, which was the fighters trying to get the fight on, the promoters trying to get the fight on. The British Boxing Board of Control sort of scuttling around the side saying, tell me, we want to know, hang on, we're here, the British Boxing Board of Control. And then a situation where it was, the second test was put them in a very difficult position. Yeah. And so eventually they got some teeth. Now, what we need to do is make sure we pinpoint the things that people say. Because what happens, I can see more and more, I watch this sport, is people say a lot of things. And then they redirect, misdirect. VADA's not an important test. Once upon a time it was the gold standard. Now it's not. Yeah. This happened, that happened. It's always someone else's fault. When the bottom line is, and nothing has ever dissuaded us from this view, someone failed a drugs test, albeit it wasn't a UCAD-based drugs test. It wasn't a voluntary drugs test. It was a mandatory drugs test on the basis of someone being inside the top 15, so you have to have it anyway. Yeah. It was a fail, and people try to put a fight on, irrespective of that. Yeah. And they tried to get the other fighter to agree that this medical condition or this particular PED wasn't particularly important, so they could have that fight. And all of it leads to a very unsavoury situation. And I look at it, and one thing being robust, and if I'm a leader of people like Eddie Hearn is, I'm going to be robust. It's another thing, never being prepared to answer the question properly, and to have the kind of attitude that he had towards Robert Smith tells me that means that there's not enough leadership in the British Boxing Board of Control, and there's too much power vested in people like Eddie Hearn. Sure. Am I wrong?
No, I totally agree with you. That's the sort of that's the feeling you got from this situation, because we didn't really seem to get the answers. I thought with getting Robert in, we was going to get the answers, some more definitive answers anyway. And I think it was going to sort of clear things up a little bit more, but we still seem to be in the same situation. I think it's just a whole legal thing surrounding it all, and that's all Robert kept telling us was, for certain.
But I think getting him here, to some extent, I don't know how many interviews he does, and I know that he would probably think that I'm a smart ass and was going to be a difficult interview for him to do. So the fact he wanted to come and do it tells that he either wants to be in front of camera more, he's got other ambitions, or he was prepared to answer certain questions.
I think he was prepared to answer certain questions. I think that he come here with it, thinking, no, listen, I'm happy to ask the questions, and he knew you wasn't going to make it easy for him. He knew that coming in, and I think that he told us pretty much what he could, but it didn't really
and again, I
clear up anything.
I go back to the questions which are that we don't find the answers to, which is why they don't have the authority to demand. But what I did like was unequivocally, not because I have any agenda in this, and not because I don't want Conor Benn to be exonerated and want Conor Benn to find his way back, because even if he were guilty, I think he should be on a redemption journey anyway. But what I don't want is the idea that somehow you've got a governing body that people can go around. Yeah. And what Robert Smith told us, in no uncertain terms, because Eddie Hearn made the point, as soon as he's exonerated, he will be resuming his career. Yeah. And Robert Smith had said previously, don't care what WBC want to do. Yeah. He will exonerate himself in our eyes. Yeah. Otherwise, he will never fight on these shores. Yeah. And that, I think, is important.
Yeah.
Not because I want Conor Benn to be sanctioned, but because we must have a governing body that has teeth.
I think that's what he stood by, though, didn't he, Robert?
That's my point.
Yeah.
That's my point. He made that point unequivocally.
Yeah.
Did you take anything else away from Roberts? I mean, it's an interesting thing to have somebody come in that's involved with the governance of the board.
Yeah.
We try to push him on other subject matters like the well-being of fighters,
Yeah.
medical conditions of fighters, the overall view of the boxing landscape, and so on and so forth. Did you take anything more away from that?
No, it's sort of everything that Robert was telling us I sort of understood and knew anyway. There was nothing new that I found out about anything. Like the Boxing Board of Control, like that, what they're trying to do is they do try and evolve. You know, they try and move on with the sort of medical procedures, the welfare of boxers. But a lot of these things, what I did find out was a lot of these things are not in place. And I think that the Boxing Board of Control need maybe more manpower to help out with that. There's only a certain amount of stuff that they can do.
Well, I also felt that there wasn't a lot of forward thinking about the way that they were going to square the circles of the problems that are naturally here. You know, Robert's idea was that £700 is a tool. If you want to be a plumber, you need to have a plumbing kit.
Yeah.
So if you want to be a fighter, you need to get your medicals, and it costs £700 a year, and that's the end of the discussion. But it doesn't look into the territory of how we're going to embrace the ideals behind CTE and repeat injuries of being hit in the head. And he'll say, and his argument was, well, this is the only sport where you naturally sign up to something knowing you're in the get hurt business. No other sport involves that kind of outlook. But that's not going to get boxing off the hook, and it's not forward thinking. And also the idea that you can't bring fighters into the fold to suggest to them that they need to pay into a sort of fund that's going to be there for their well-being post their careers was limited for me.
Yeah.
It was limited thinking. It was like, well, we haven't done it before. We've tried to do it. They aren't embracing it, so we ain't going to do it.
Yeah.
On one hand, these are halcyon days. British boxing is alive and everything's thriving. On the other hand, we're not going to think outside the box and build opportunities to make the landscape better for younger fighters, to make the landscape better for fighters post their careers. I mean, the conversation was directed based upon Kell Brook and his challenges.
Yeah.
And I get that Kell Brook's not fighting anymore, so how much of a support mechanism can there be? But there needs to be more grown-up thinking, I think. And I didn't get the impression that there was enough of that.
I think that, you know, when Robert suggested, you know, that, Kell Brook, you know, no longer is fighting, so he was a retired fighter, so, you know, we've got to think about the welfare. Well, you know, I think those problems were there probably for Kell Brook, you know, at the end of his career. And that's, I think what we was talking about was that maybe Robert didn't answer was, you know, we're talking about having something in place when they do retire, you know, like Kell. And it's like...
His argument was that you can levy what I was saying is that you should make a levy on every single fight, whether it's someone going in a ring and getting paid £1,500 a round or whatever it is, someone getting paid big bucks. The bottom line is there has to be some form of levy that goes back into a central fund that's put under management that then manages the outcomes for fighters during the difficult times in their career, like COVID, so people don't get paid, no one can spar, they couldn't get any money, so where does that leave them? And you have situations like Jack Massey having to work on a building site. No one's immune from doing anything, but there should be a better framework for looking after valuable assets, which are the fighters. Because without those, you ain't got a sport.
Sure.
Right? So the British Boxing Board of Control needs to do better. It needs to suggest that ultimately, to young fighters and to mid-range fighters, but 5% of your purse goes into a central fund, and you get the benefit of that from a pension point of view and from a medical point of view, and that's how we framework it, and that's how we're doing it, and that's how you're doing it, because we're the British Boxing Board of Control, and that is the conditions of your licence.
Yeah, I get that.
And that requires balls. The problem with that is that their funding arrangements, you know, puts them at conflict again with Eddie Hearns of the world, because part of my thought process when I was walking away from this is, do you not want to have a fight with Eddie, really? Because the sanctioning fees that you get from the fights that he puts on puts you in an invidious position. Is that not the fight you want to have?
Yeah.
And that, to me, puts everything at odds with the ideal. And that's when I'm listening to Eddie talking about the victims complex that he's building up, about people having the audacity to question him, and also the backdrop of how Robert Smith is a and this is the guy that runs the British Boxing Board of Control.
Yeah.
You fucking lunatics running the asylum. I'm sorry, but there we are.
Yeah.
But look, I mean, I will absolutely, if we are still doing these shows in a year's time, which I've no reason to believe that we won't, I will be dragging Robert Smith back here, trawling over the observations that he made and going, bang, you said this.
Yeah.
Bang, you said that. Bang, you said this, and this has not happened, or that hasn't happened, or we want to get behind this because you hid behind the veneer of legalese. I don't agree with you cannot break that cover, but you want to be in an arse covering exercise that you don't want to expose yourself to any obligations because everyone's getting very litigious. But there will come a point where that's been sorted out, and we need to make him accountable. In the same way that the reasons why other promoters that we talked about, and don't dare use their name because they'll tell us that we're trading off it, don't want to come on because they'll have to account for what they've said in the past.
Sure.
But look, Robert Smith came on. It was the first time in the 14 shows that we've done, or 13 at the time, that we'd brought a third will into it, and it was an interesting third will.
I think we got a good response from it as well.
Yeah.
We did. You know, if you look on social medias and comments on there, I think, you know, that people respected that Robert had the balls to come on.
There will always be people
they knew he was going to get a tough time, and you know, he'd done what he could. So I thought it was a good day.
There will always be people that say we didn't ask hard enough questions. There'll always be people that expected people to put their foot on someone's throat.
Yeah.
But there's only so many times that you can ask Robert Smith the same question. Okay. And the irony of it is, going back to our mate snake oil salesman, that we didn't ask questions about the chronological order and why did it take them X amount of time. It was the first question. So I saw Hearn talking about...
that was part of the interview, isn't it?
Well, just ridiculous, preposterous misrepresentation. This is the problem, it seems to me, as a guy coming in that loves his boxing and knows the business of sport and will inevitably be involved in the business of boxing, watching people just misdirect. But people didn't say that. That wasn't what you said. And by the way, the accusation that people aren't asking people the questions, why didn't people ask Robert Smith why it took him so long? It was...
your first question.
Literally the first question, mate. Anyway, let's move on from Robert Smith. We'll keep him for another day. Josh Taylor and Jack Catterall. I'm a major advocate for this fight happening, and I'm trying to square a circle that seems to have evolved, which is Josh Taylor versus Teofimo Lopez.
But you know what?
Tell me what you think of that.
I was really upset when I heard that. Listen, that fight, you know, that's a sexy fight. You know, Josh Taylor versus
It's a good fight, but it doesn't alter the fact that Jack Catterall's been
that's the point. It's like, you know, if this Catterall situation never happened, I go, yeah, wicked. That's a brilliant fight. I want to see that. The best versus the best. But the situation of Catterall's not been cleaned up, you know, and he's been left there for 12 months waiting for this fight. The fight was on, then it got cancelled because Josh Taylor got injured. Then it was on again, then it's got cancelled again. You know, I feel sorry for Jack Catterall, I really do, because, you know, we both felt very, very much the same, like 99% of the other people in the country, Robert Smith included. There was only one winner there, that was Jack Catterall, and he should have got the opportunity to fight him again. And I thought, first when Josh Taylor first accepted the rematch, I was like, fair play to you, Josh, because, you know, that was a tough night for you, but I respect what you're doing and giving him that opportunity again. All right, it's not for the undisputed, but at least Catterall gets that opportunity. And it's fell through again. He's injured his foot. And I still thought, well, we're going to get the rematch. And now he's gone the other direction. So I was just thinking, did you not really want that fight?
Do you think,
did you not really want that rematch?
He will maintain that he won that fight. You know, there was a moral obligation, I thought, upon Carl Froch to fight George Groves again because of the hoo-ha and the brouhaha going around the fact that Howard Foster stopped it early. I think balance of time has probably stopped it at the right time. But Carl took it on. And what he wanted to do was he wanted to put George Groves in his place because he didn't like the performance he put out. He didn't like the chance he
wanted to right the wrongs of what happened in that last fight.
Even though he won the fight, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Now, Josh Taylor didn't win that fight. He won it by the very nature of what was given to him, but he didn't win that fight, and most people know it, right? So do you think he damages himself? Do you think this pound for pound, he had a case. He had a case, Josh Taylor, to have a victim's complex because the TV broadcasters weren't picking him up. He was winning great fights and no one was giving him any coverage. And then all of a sudden, people are light upon Josh Taylor in the mainstream and they start to see him and they start to patronise him and say, well, actually, blimey, this could be a pound for pound here. And he fights Catterall, shows him no respect, which I don't blame him, because why should he show him any respect to the build-up? Showed him no respect whatsoever, pretty much thought he was going to walk through him. And now, to add insult to injury...
he's gone in a different direction.
Gone a different direction. Do you think it damages Josh, or do you think it'll just be chip paper?
It tarnishes his reputation as a fighter, definitely, and the longevity of that, without a doubt. He has to go over that again with Catterall. He needs to, he needs to put that right. He needs to put it to bed, should I say.
Is there any mitigation?
I think he's always going to be tarnished with that otherwise. I think the way that Catterall's been treated after this as well has not been particularly good, you know, with the fight being cancelled and then him choosing to go a different direction. Well, why would you choose to go a different direction?
Is there any mitigation about timings? Because obviously he's injured himself, Josh. And then Jack has immediately turned around and said, well, I can't wait, you know.
Well, I'll make him right, though.
I can't wait. I've got to get him out.
No, but I'll make him right.
Fight.
Yeah, no.
So he's gone out, and then all of a sudden, boom, over the top has come. Well, Josh Taylor can now fight Teofimo Lopez.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think it's a frustrating. I spoke to Jack about this actually, and he said, "Look, I can't sit around forever waiting for that rematch. I've got to focus on my career."
What's his attitude towards
what
Josh Taylor?
He's not happy. He's not happy, you know, obviously because he felt that he won the fight, but then he thought, well, fair play, Josh has given me this rematch. He said, and then since he's offered me the rematch, he said, I've been nothing but, you know, messed around for months. And I'm sitting there, it's been a frustrating time for me, it's been a difficult time for me, and now I've got to try and resume my career and go down a different path. So I think he's fighting on March the 25th, I believe, yeah? I think that's a possibility for him, but he needs to resume his career. He needs to get on with his career because he's in the prime right now, by the way, as well. Distracted. You know, they're wasting the best years of his boxing career. So, yeah, very frustrated for him. And I'm frustrated we never got the rematch, if I'm totally honest. It is what it is. Hopefully we will revisit it somewhere down the line.
Well, if he doesn't take it, Josh Taylor, he will get away with it being a W on his record, but in people's minds, it'll be...
Yeah,
you didn't deal with this properly.
It won't fade away because of the controversy surrounding that.
And I don't think it should be allowed to.
Yeah.
And as busy as we've been, you explicitly on the Conor Benn situation about how unhappy you are because you take a bigger risk than me because I couldn't care less what they think, right? You do. These are relationships you have to have, right? We need to keep on top of this one because I do think that Jack Catterall has earned the right to fight Josh Taylor.
I agree.
And Josh Taylor, as one of those fighters that we've put up there as a pound for pound, needs to take care of that business.
I
think it will diminish him. Will diminish him if he doesn't do it. Final part of this section. Let's talk about the fight on Saturday, which was a huge disappointment for me to see Leigh Wood get knocked out by Mauricio Lara. It was a great fight. By the way, it was a great card.
Yeah, it was
a great card.
Eddie put on a good show.
Yeah. And it was a great fight, and I felt that Leigh was struggling at times during the fight, but managed to get himself into control of his own destiny, and was getting the right outcomes in certain rounds, and getting to the point where he could put himself in a position for the championship rounds to be able to fight perhaps a different way than he had to do during the beginning of the fight. What did you make of Lara?
Yeah.
What did you make of the finish? What did you make of Leigh Wood? What did you make of the whole thing?
Listen, I think that Leigh Wood put himself into a position where a lot of people felt that was the point of the fight where he was going to start turning it around. If he could get through those first 6 rounds, we knew what Mauricio Lara was all about. We knew he was tough. You know, we've seen that against Josh Warrington when he come over here and he beat Josh Warrington the first time. He was an unknown quantity, but what we took from that was he's a good combination puncher. He's very heavy-handed and he's tough, very tough, you know. And as Leigh Wood was building up momentum. He was building up rounds. He was hurting Lara a couple of times. Lara was having his
himself though.
That's what I'm saying. Lara was having his moments as well.
Big moments.
But I think the finish comes sort of out of nowhere. I think Leigh Wood was at that stage of the fight, like I say, where I thought he's going to start turning it around here. Now he's going into like the sort of like the second half of the fight. This will be Leigh Wood's territory. This is where I see him be gaining momentum and getting the rounds in the bag. And then out of nowhere, simultaneous both through left hooks. Lara's one landed. And I've got to say, the corner work from Ben Davison for me was spot on. And I saw that Tony Bellew and a few others had their own opinions on what was going on. I think even Cole Frotch at the time as well. But when you looked at it and you see Leigh Wood get up and you look at the legs, his legs were still stiff. They were in the corner with Ben Davison as well. So Ben had a clear sight into what his fight was like. He knows his fight better than anyone else. When the towel first come in, I must admit initially, when I watched it, I was like, what's he throwing the towel in for? He's the champion. Let him continue. But then when I look at it back and I look at where they were positioned, like where Lara was, where he put himself with a referee, when the referee had just finished the count, he'd gone over, he'd put himself in a position, I thought, if the referee says box, within a half a second, Lara would have landed another one of those left hooks. And you've got to let a fighter live. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then we're getting into the territory of, this could be serious. Yeah. So I'm glad the fight ended when it did. Gutted for Leigh Wood. But it just showed what a tough fighter Mauricio Lara is. I mean, he's proved that he's probably one of the best featherweights out there in the world at the moment.
I thought, from the point of view of watching it through my eyes, I thought that Leigh struggled significantly during certain parts of that fight.
Yeah.
And began to get his rhythm around about 3 and 4 and move from there. And
they were the danger rounds he come out of.
I always felt, I don't know about you, I always felt this impending sort of sense of doom, because whilst he started to really worry Lara in 5 and 6, I just felt that there's something about this guy that can create a problem here.
Yeah.
Now, that's not me wanting to be a foresayer or a foreteller of doom, but it just worried me, the whole shape of the fight.
You had a look at it where you was going, although it looked like Leigh Wood was starting to weather the storm a little bit and started to come through. You always knew that there was an element of danger there, and you could just sense you were just sitting there. As I was watching the fight, I'm sitting there looking, going, I'm looking at Lara going, he's going to let one go in a minute. Yeah. He's going to let one go in a minute. And that's the sort of way you was at with it. Yeah, Wood was having moments, he landed some big shots himself, Leigh Wood. It was very heavy-handed as well. But you just felt that, that's what I got. I got that feeling when I was looking at it thinking, Lara's going to get him in a minute. Lara's going to land one in a minute. And ultimately, that's what he done. But, I mean, great contest.
I had no problem insofar as, you know, either one of us are trainers or doctors, had no problem with the stoppage. I looked at it and thought,
the stoppage was good.
You know, even at the time, disappointment was my overriding emotion. Oh no, Leigh, this is not what I wanted for you. But my overriding reaction was I could see the stoppage. Yeah. I think sometimes with Ben Davison, people, there's a slight resistance to Ben Davison. I think people start to think that he puts himself in front and centre of it and is a little bit more about himself. But I think he's a good trainer.
Listen, he proved that on what he done there the other night, right? Because Leigh Wood's the champion. And I respect Leigh for going into that fight because I love the fact, you know, with boxing, and we'll get into this later on in the show as well, boxing politics are getting away from certain fights being made, like stopping certain fights being made, etc., different TV networks, whatever it is. But I respect that Leigh Wood took that fight because it was a fight that you go, that's a high-risk fight, that. And I love the fact that Leigh put it on the line and done what he done. So you've got to respect that. Yeah, I think he will activate that rematch.
And I do think that Leigh Wood, knowing what he knows now about Mauricio Lara, if he didn't know it before, he knows it now. Yeah. I don't think he has the same problems that Josh Warrington had. Yeah. I think that Josh Warrington in the first fight was so damaged by Lara, and then we thought maybe just maybe it was down to Josh Warrington not being at his A game. We saw the same thing. We saw the same pattern emerging in the second fight. And I think Leigh Wood is in a slightly different space. I noticed the bad blood between bloody Lara and Josh Warrington.
Josh Warrington after.
Spit on him or something like that. That's right. Lovely. Bad blood there. But look, I mean, Leigh Wood will be back. And
listen, I think the rematch could, you know, he can turn it around because like you say, I think that he'll look at that, realise where he made the mistakes. It's boxing, you know, one shot could turn a fight around, and that was proof that could happen. But, if they had a rematch, I would say, Leigh could do it, definitely.
Yeah, listen, just going back one step, and to the discussion we had prior to this one, which is about Jack Catterall and Josh Taylor, do you not think it's logical, I think Bob Arum thinks it's logical, that the winner of Josh Taylor and Teofimo Lopez could subsequently fight Jack Catterall?
I hope so. I really hope so, because Catterall deserves that, you know, and I think for boxing, I think that needs to happen, you know, because, you know, we're in a situation with boxing at the moment where we see a lot of things that, you know, we don't like, and politics get in the way. That kid deserves that rematch, or he deserves the winner of that fight. So, all right, let Josh Taylor go and have the Teofimo fight. That's fine. Yeah. But let the winner please fight Jack Catterall, because he deserves that.
His promoters have got to step in and make sure that Jack Catterall's the noise in the room.
Absolutely.
There's a fair amount of noise, because he feels like he's being treated. I don't want to go back over old ground, but it feels like he's being treated like like he should be grateful for being there.
I agree.
And that's got to be done by Ben and the promoter, or Ben is the promoter, to make sure that Jack is probably represented in this situation. Yeah. Okay, Spence, let's move on to the event that you're flying out to. I'm avoiding like the plague. Jake Paul and Tommy Fury.
Yeah.
Again, there's lots of noise being around this fight. One of the big noises that come out, which is, as much as I'm trying not to pay attention to it, I feel that I probably have to. The idea that Jake Paul is going to get ranked, if he wins this fight, he's going to get ranked inside the top 40 of the WBC. Yeah. I think that's preposterous.
It's insane.
I imagine a bunch of fighters that have been plying their trade with far more integrity than Jake Paul has will probably have the same reaction. What say you?
It's insane. I mean, you know, it's upset a lot of fighters as well, you know. Like Jake Paul gets a top 40 ranking by the WBC, and this is ultimately why are they doing it? It's all about the money, mate.
They believe that it's all about the money. Opportunity.
Let's have it right. You know, like, if it was somebody else, would they be doing that? Like, you know, on the basis of what? He's not had a professional boxing contest yet. He's boxed at former MMA stars, UFC stars, or whatever, but he's never boxed a legitimate boxer. This is the first one. In Tommy Fury, 8-0, 4 KOs, no one on his record, still very much a raw novice as a heavyweight in the baby stages of his career. Yeah. And on that basis, you get a top 40 ranking by the WBC, really? I mean, come on. I mean, that's insane. That's preposterous. That's crazy.
How deep is this division, though? I mean, I'm not making any case for this whatsoever. I'm not making any suggestion that there's an argument that we can avail ourselves of that subsequently, because he's had 5 or 6 fights where he's put his hands up and looked reasonable and he's licensed, and it's not misfits, right? It is. I get the argument. I know it's not misfits. I know there's more capability in this situation. But how deep is this division? Because it strikes me that the cruiserweight division isn't that deep a division anyway. How many fights would you have to have to be considered inside the top 40?
Look, if you look at the cruiserweights that we've got, like, let's use this in our country, like Lawrence Okoli, who's just signed up with boxer, Chris Billum, Smith, Richard Riakpo. Yeah. That is a decent standard. Jack Massey, that is a good standard. Look on the undercard of this fight, and we've got a WBC cruiserweight title fight on there. Yeah. Badou Jack, 39 years of age, been around a long time, great fighter in his day. Beat George Groves. You know, was unlucky. I thought very unlucky against James DeGale when they had the draw. And I thought Badou Jack won that fight and won it quite comfortably. We saw him box on the undercard. Saw him box a couple of months ago. And you could clearly see his best days were gone. You know, he looks watery. He looks at every bit his age. He's getting a shot at the WBC champion, Makabu, who's equally, I think he's about his age as well.
Tony Bellew.
Yeah, that's right. Everton football ground. Tony Bellew flattened him in a couple of rounds. But I mean, you got your WBC cruiserweight world title fight on the undercard of Jake Paul and Tommy Fury. It tells you the sort of magnitude of Jake Paul, or the interest of Jake Paul, Tommy Fury. There's a lot of interest surrounding it. Whatever way you want to do it. I'm intrigued going out there, and it's not like, and I know you might give me a little bit saying, oh, you started off the YouTube stuff, so you're invested in it and all that. But all jokes aside, all jokes aside, I'm interested in the fight. You know, for a number of reasons.
Well, what are you interested for? Because do you want to? I mean, in all honesty, do you want to see Jake Paul getting his face filled in?
I want to see Tommy Fury win this fight, and I want to see Tommy Fury go out there and do it. Do you know why? Because I'm from the boxing world. Tommy Fury's from the boxing world, and Jake Paul. But take nothing away from Jake Paul and what he's achieved in the sport and what he's doing for the sport. You know, he's managing fighters. Look what he's done for Amanda Serrano. You know, the opportunity he's got her, the money that she's earning from Jake Paul. So take nothing away from the kid. He's brought a lot of eyeballs to the sport, and he's doing his thing, and he works hard, really hard, to get himself into the position where he's at right now. So I'm taking nothing away from him. But the boxer's got to win this fight, surely. I mean, if he doesn't, it's going to be a difficult road back. In fact, actually, forget that. There's no road back for Tommy Fury.
Do you take Tommy Fury particularly seriously? Let's be honest. If his name wasn't Fury,
absolutely,
would you take him seriously at all?
No, I think that Tommy Fury's,
and that's the conundrum we've got.
The problem that Tommy's had so far is, I think he's always had a little bit of natural ability, Tommy Fury, and I did think that when he first turned pro, first saw him, I thought, you know what, this kid can fight a little bit. Yeah. But then, obviously, you know, he's gone down that influencer route, and he's going on, Love Island, etc.
The bookies are rating Jake Paul the favourite, right?
I can't believe that.
The problem is with bookies, they more often than not don't get it wrong, do they?
No.
Is it thrilling to know that you're marginal favourite with the bookmakers as well?
It's funny, man. It's funny. I've been saying it, but I've been boxing for 2 years and 364 days as a professional. Tomorrow's my 3-year anniversary as a pro boxer. And I think it's hilarious that a kid who's been doing it his whole life, comes from a legendary bloodline, is the underdog. But I think people just know that I'm built different, bro. I'm Ohio, thick-boned, ready to kill.
And you've been an athlete in your life as well. That's what people forget. We've talked about this, you and I. People forget your athletic pedigree.
Yeah, no, they get confused by the past image that they've known of me in their head, which is the crazy YouTuber guy. So they forget that I was, a state-ranked wrestler, a state-ranked football player, and all these things.
Otherwise, they wouldn't be in business.
I mean, where do you see the fight going, though? From
my position of deep-seated disinterest, I look at seeing the idea that where's the money in the room? And the money in the room is Jake Paul.
Well, so are you being guided by the betting odds?
The money in the room. Who wins legal cases? The guy with the most money.
Yeah. Who
does things and controls his own destiny? The guy with the most money. Who's the money in the room? Jake Paul. You bring the curtain down on Jake Paul now by putting him in against a fighter
and
he gets his clock cleaned, then he can never make the argument that he can go in again, because what he is, he will just be a YouTube fighter.
Yeah.
He'll be back into a certain category. So my fear is that there's an element of, not the fixes in, this is not Jake LaMotta.
Yeah,
the bottom line is this is a situation that I think the money in the room dictates the outcome. And that to me feels like Jake Paul. And and in reality to Tommy Fury, with all due respect to the Fury family, he is just a Fury by name.
Yeah.
And I'll be interested to see if I can eat those words. And he goes and knocks out Jake Paul and gives us all a smile and puts us all back. Because I mean, listen to Richard Riakporhe and listening to obviously Richard Riakporhe last week on a different show arguing about Lawrence Okoli, but Richard Riakporhe being greeted with the news that Jake Paul was going to be put in the cruiserweight rankings. He said, give him to me.
Yeah,
you don't want any of me.
Because they're chasing the mullah. They know where the money's at.
Well, more to the point, they're like, come on now, don't be serious. This is big boy stuff. Now, you want to get in with me, you're going to get hurt.
Yeah, but you're talking about levels there. Like when you're talking about Riakporhe's and Billum Smiths and...
But they want to put them in his rankings.
Yeah, no, but what I'm saying is...
When you wins a couple of fights, they'll have him inside the top 20 by their own logic, won't they?
Then we're talking... That's what I'm saying. Going in like the top 40, I mean, surely there's a danger element to that, surely. Because you're talking about now, you're getting into a decent level of fighting. No disrespect to Jake Paul, but he's not even proven that he's worthy of being a professional boxer. You know, he's done the white-collar circuit, he's boxed the UFC fighters, and he looks like he's doing well. But this is where we find out whether he can really fight, because Tommy Fury has the tools, really, to go in there and do a number on him. That's what I think.
Well, we'll see. What I was also disappointed is my mate, Carl Froch, indexing himself to Jake Paul. Or it being indexed. I mean, I know...
I didn't find that disappointing, but I'm going to have my reasons.
But I know Carl made a comment about they're clowns and they'll get found out, and it subsequently got into this sort of, that means I'm calling someone out. But for me, Carl Froch is a legend of British boxing. Sure. He's got nothing to prove to no one about anything. He doesn't need to be... So I was sort of, in my puritanical, pious way, going, no, Carl, you don't need to be in that space. You're in a different level of reputation and repute and background and competency.
Yeah,
I don't really want that sort of cross between Catweasel meets Aquaman in the conversation with you, Jake Paul, but you might have a different view.
No, do you know what? I saw it, and I saw Cole putting out that interview. Was it yesterday I saw that? Was it yesterday or the day before? Anyway, I saw the interview going out, and I saw Cole, and I looked at him, and I've known Cole a long time, and I know when he's being serious, and he was being serious there. Do you know what it is? I think when someone like Cole Froch, who's had an unbelievable boxing career, what he achieved in the sport was incredible, and the way that he come back from certain fights, and that desire to win, even in the 12th round against Jermaine Taylor, when he was a mile behind on the scorecards, but he just knocks him out with seconds to go. Yeah. Like, it's incredible. He'll go down as one of the all-time greats of British boxing. He really will. But that fire still burns inside. You can see that. And when he sees someone like Jake Paul doing what he's doing, I think that his Cole off a little bit, because he looks at it and goes, like, this kid and what he's doing, he goes, I want to put him in. And I think when Cole done that interview, he's looking at it going, I really want to put this kid in his place. Because Jake Paul mentioning his name, he's going, don't mention my name, mate. Forget that I'm 45 years of age.
But he only
I will
mentioned
come
it
back.
because Carl called him a clown.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Right, so Carl opened that door.
Yeah.
And Catweasel walked through it.
Yeah.
And will, of course, by the very nature of Carl Froch's name, Jake Paul and his contingency or his contingent of admirers, it's going to get it fuels the myth. And I don't mind Jake Paul making inordinate amounts of money out of what he markets as legitimate fights, and he beats Tommy Fury, fine, he goes to the next level. But that next level isn't Carl Froch.
No, don't let him get in there with Carl Froch. Forget Froch is 45, right? All about levels, yeah. And Cole Froch has kept himself in good nick, as you know. Yeah. Kept himself in good nick since he finished boxing. And I know there's an appetite there from Cole, because he'd go, I'll do that. Because he's just that burning desire to get back in the ring. And he'll think, at this level, I'll go and pick up. He likes a few quid, Cole, by the way, and all. He does like a few quid, you know what I mean? I know, but, if you and Cole went to a cafe for breakfast, trust me, Carl he won't be paying. No. So he likes a few quid, right? So he's looking at that going, there's a few quid on the table there, and I'll absolutely flatten this kid. And that's where he's at. So I saw Derek Chisora, by the way. Did you see that interview that Derek Chisora done? Where Derek said, Jake Paul wins this fight, he wins it. I'll have 200 grand with any man's money. I went, but really?
That means anyone's money but his.
Yeah.
Right, so Derek writes checks that he never ends up cashing.
Yeah. Like, he owes you money, don't he?
He owes me money. I've given up. I don't even bother. I looked at his dreadful jewelry he had the other day and I assumed he'd put the money towards that. But no, I mean, listen, mate, again, you're selling it to me now.
Yeah.
Because I don't want Carl in there because he's my mate. and I like him. Although he wants to have a word with me because you got me to say that Calzaghe would beat him.
Yeah, I know, but when he said that, by the way, and I've seen the relationship, the bromance that you two have built up now, because when he went, by the way, Simon, I'll have a word with you. I can see a little twinkle. I can see a little twinkle in his eye.
Yeah.
I know when he Cole, and I know when he really means it, and he really meant it when he was talking about Jake Paul. Yeah. When he talks about his mate Simon Jordan, there was love in the air still.
But I'm happy. I
could feel it. I could feel it, mate. Even in the interview, the love was coming through the
Spencer,
telly.
you're getting a little bit witty in your old age. I'm normally the piss taker. Well done, you. But on the other side of the argument, I would actually quite like Carl Froch to go in there and beat him up. So there's another side of it.
There you go.
Anyway, listen, have a great time in Saudi.
Yeah, thank you.
Right, that's it for episode 14 of Talk Boxing with Simon Jordan and Spencer Oliver. Now, don't forget, it's a must to keep liking and subscribing. And of course, watch the Q&A, which comes out on Sunday.